Welcome to the show, Joe Washbourn. How are you, mate?
Yeah, very well. How you doing?
I'm not too bad. So how's things in life? All good?
Yes, yeah, all good. We just finished the weekend doing the last festival of the summer, so they all went really well. I had a great summer. Been out playing. I don't know how many there were, sort of probably near 40 or something like that. So yeah, it's been a great summer. Actually, I mean, lots of different places, and really enjoyed it. The set's been going well, and yeah, it's been great.
Oh, good. What has been your sort of like favourite sort of tour memory this summer?
I don't know. We did. I mean, there's lots of different ones really. I mean, there's one particular festival we really enjoyed called the Big Retreat, which is out in Pembrokeshire,
Nice.
Wales. It's like a kind of yoga-y kind of thing, which is always a really nice setup. We also did a gig with Razor Light and Embrace and The Feeling, which was a real good sort of, I think it was called Heritage Live, which was really good fun. So yeah, I mean, all of them have got their own sort of. We've done a few of the foodies festivals, which were always really good. Lovely. One of those festivals you can go and eat really well and drink really well, and then get some live music on top as well. So yeah, there's been lots of highlights.
Oh, so you've had a bit of a mixed bag then, haven't you? Really, all different types of festivals.
Well, yeah, I mean they are. That's the joy of festivals, really. Otherwise, if you did the same one every weekend, it would probably get a bit dull. But yeah, and they really do sort of you mix it up, and that's part of the fun of the job, really.
And now, of course, one of the reasons we've got you on is because you'll be performing on the island very soon, won't you? Tell us about that.
We're coming to the Isle of Wight on Friday the 22nd at the Strings venue, which is in Newport, and yeah, we're looking forward to it. I mean, it's always nice to come over to the Isle of Wight. We always have a great time. We're all kind of South Coast guys ourselves, so it's sort of a little bit home from home. So yeah, we're looking forward to it. And also, again, it's not a festival, so it'd be really nice to get back into the sort of venues, surroundings, and do a gig, a kind of indoor gig for change.
Yeah, I mean, I've been to Strings myself, and it's a really good little intimate venue, to be honest. Probably completely different to what the normal stuff you do generally.
Yeah, that's nice though. I mean, it's as I say, we've been doing, it's all festivals, so and also with festivals, it's not also your own crowd. Your own crowd. They come to see other things as well, and it's kind of all that element. You've got to try and win people over. But yeah, I mean, it's going to be really nice playing in, like you say, in a bit more of an intimate setting, and it means we can mix the set up a little bit more, play a bit more sort of, rough cuts from the back catalogue and stuff like that. So yeah, we're looking forward to it.
Now, how did you get together with the band way back when you started?
The band formed in sort of mid-90s, I think it was, in Eastbourne. I was in a band with Rob, the drummer, and the bass player, and also in another band with Dan, the guitar player. And it was one of those things where we sort of just joined two bands together. To begin with, I wasn't singing, and the singer pulled out or did something else, so we had to get. It was like, okay, will you ever go at singing? It was one of those things. Once we found the lineup that we thought worked, and very quickly thought, wow, this it's sounding how we want it to sound. We got signed in '97, which I think we did lots of touring and up and down the country trying to sort of learn a craft, so to speak. So and then the first album didn't come out till 3 years after that. So there was a long time of sort of perfecting the songs and going in the studio with getting the producers right, and I think a lot of people would think it would seem quite sort of quick, but it for us it was definitely more about getting things right and playing. There's nothing like playing live really to get the songs right, and also to learn your craft really is the best way of doing it.
Now, looking back, would you say that sort of those sort of 3-4 years that you were just mentioning there, in the long run, benefited you when it came to sort of getting the big success that you guys have had and playing the bigger arenas?
I think it did, and I also think it's meant it's given us longevity as far as a live band goes, because that's what it was always about. Was always about playing live, and I think these days a lot bands don't always get a chance to do that, because it's very much about the sort of quick hit of having a something that charts, and then everyone moves on. And so I mean we were always it was all about playing live. If anything, we didn't know about the recording process. I mean, I remember the record company saying to us to begin with, what producers do you want to work with? And none of us knew what a producer was. So, so yeah, I think in the long run, and that's what we love doing now, and that's what people keep coming back for. Maybe is the live stuff. So I think it definitely stood us in good stead. Instead going out and down the country playing to sort of one person and with his dog standing at the bar. There's nothing like that to sort of ground you and focus you into what you're doing.
Yeah. I mean, that makes sense. It's worth saying, obviously, that Toploader. See, when I was younger, you guys were, and still are, a massive band. What was that sort of early success in like the first sort of 4 or 5 years really like going from doing what you were doing and just really perfecting the craft all the way to a few years later headlining big shows, festivals, going to awards dues, stuff like that?
I think really it was easy to answer. I mean, it was all very, very strange, to be honest. We all quite normal guys, and no one had, we didn't go to sort of any sort of university of music or like that. So it was all very unusual, and we were all didn't have any tools to sort of deal with it massively. None of us were media trained or anything like that. So yeah, it was an awful lot of. For me, as a songwriter, it was as much as it was fun and it was what we dreamed of doing, was getting a deal and then having a top 10 album and blah 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 and all these things. But at the same time, brought lots of other things with it, sort of lots of pressures, and it was a mental sort of 3 or 4 years promoting that first album as well. That was pretty relentless, really. I mean, much the same as I'm sure every band would say, when they have a successful album. It then adds its own pressures onto the album that follows that up, stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, it was great fun in lots of ways. And looking back on it, and in lots of ways, we weren't equipped to deal with it at all, really. So I would say I've enjoyed being in Toploader since we've reformed in sort of 2011 to the present more than I did the first time round, because it's just been on our own terms and just a sort of a lot slightly less frantic and hectic. We didn't. You'd literally wake up and you wouldn't know what was coming from one day to the next, really. So it was funny because it's one of the things you can't ever moan about, because there's lots of bands that would have, loved to have that sort of success on the first album. But yeah, it brought some interesting problems with it as well.
Can you remember the first time, sort of looking back, when you'd sort of made it, where you met one of your sort of big musical influences, either at an event or something, or could you imagine what that sort of felt like as like a young band?
That's not really obviously why you sort of set out to do it. I mean, I'd love to have. Bowie was my sort of, my one of my sort of heroes, and I never got a chance to, unfortunately, meet him. We did do a Queen's Jubilee, I think in 2001, and there was an awful lot of people there. I don't know about, people Paul McCartney was there, and we met Shirley Bassey, and all in the same night, and so it was one of these things where there was a million people there. But I mean, we were all awful at schmoozing, and so it wasn't like so much as working in a room as sort of standing in the corner drinking the free booze and sort of I think kids these days are far more clued up with sort of that side of things. But yeah, I mean, we did meet people along the way. Paul Weller was always a big sort of supporter of ours early on, and he was, we loved his music and still do, and so that was nice to get sort of recognition from people that you respected, that also like what we were doing, and he was super helpful with, getting on tours and giving us a bit of a leg when we didn't really know how to take the live stuff to the next level, really.
I mean, that's invaluable to have as well, to have someone like that you can sort of ask questions up to and about certain situations, isn't it? Like, just to have that breadth of knowledge, like someone like Paul Weller.
Yeah, I mean, the people we support. I mean, we did big support tours with Bon Jovi and Robbie Williams, and I don't think we ever went up and asked. It's not a question of sort of asking people. It's just watching. It's very different watching someone from the side of the stage and seeing how they, can work the audience, and someone like Robbie is incredible at working the audience. John Bon Jovi was amazing at it. Weller had a different sort of thing, and it was much more gritty and much more live. So we sort of take it. I'm sure everyone in the band would say that as well. You just take little bits of everything you like and use it for your own show, really.
Like, in some respects, you'd almost be silly not to, really, in those company, wouldn't you, really? I mean, I also heard, I read recently that around that time you was the last British band to ever play the old Wembley, which I thought was a pretty...
Yeah, I mean, it sounds much more exciting than... we were the last British band. It was... I mean, we actually were supporting Bon Jovi, which was... who were obviously American, so it was easy for us to say we were the last British band. It made it sound like it was our gig, but... yeah, I mean, we were the main support on that tour, and it was the night... It was... They played the last... the last gig at the old Wembley, which was incredible, with 90,000 people. I mean, it was, one of those amazing sort of career highlight type things, and also, one of the most scary things you could do. And yeah, literally as the Bon Jovi crew were packing up and getting out, I think the diggers were pretty much rolling in to get ready for the next morning. So and they start, so there were people out on the pitch taking bits of turf, and some of the Bon Jovi crew were ripping out, seats, and so it was a iconic place. It's in lots of amazing football, sporting events, but also live music, and it was very privileged to be part of that and to sort of say goodbye to it, really. How
would you say your sort of, as a band, over the years, the songwriting process has it changed, or has it pretty much remained the same?
Well, I mean, I still write the songs, so I mean the way I've done it has changed completely. I mean, when we first started out, it was very much like a 4-track, or I'd go into the studio and just play the piano and play a song, and everyone would be chucking their 10 pence in. I mean, these days everyone has a studio at home, so I have a studio at home, so everything is much more finished, much more produced probably than it used to be, so I can go with much more finished ideas, which the band either really like or have a go at me saying, what do we do now? You finished it, or so yeah, it's still me trying to write and come up with stuff. It's just these days I think I can finish the ideas off a little bit more than I could back then. I mean, I couldn't even work. There weren't really any laptops or particularly computers that would do run music software and stuff like that. But also I didn't know how to use one, so. That's what's happened in the interim, is that with Logic and home studios and stuff like that, it's much easier to formulate ideas. But yeah, I mean, things always take once we start playing as a band, they take on different kind of characteristics anyway, and immediately kind of just sound like us, really, which is we don't have to try too much to make it sound like a Toploader song, because as soon as we're all sort of playing it together, it inevitably does, really.
Now, with your songwriting, is there any particular sort of source of inspiration that you always tap into? Not. I mean, I don't think it's the same every time. I think generally when you've got something to say, it's always better from a lyrical point of view. I mean, melody-wise, I've never really had too much problems with melody or inspiration or stuff like that. I think, but lyrically, it's always better when you've actually got something to say, as opposed to sitting down and going, I had a nice breakfast, just had a nice cup of tea. It's always better when you've got something in your mind. Lockdown was a great example of that. I mean, I wrote, constantly during lockdown, because it was such an odd time for lots of people and lots of strange emotions running through, us and everyone we knew and the country and stuff like that. And it was an very odd situation to be in. So lyrically, I had an awful lot going on then. Yeah, I mean, it could be anything. A book you've read, or something, another song you've heard, or but also these days, if I can't get it straight away, it just goes into sort of like, finish one day file, and you can come back to it, and that's the other nice thing about writing, on digital software. You can come back to it and finish it, or there's loads in my head that I haven't had time to put down, or. So yeah, I think I found a way of working with songwriting now that I always struggled on tour to write, because I'm a pianist, so trying to find a piano, to write on after a gig was always difficult, and I was very envious of guitar players who could just go up to a room and take a guitar up. Everyone wants to play the guitar, don't they, at some point?
Well, yeah, I mean, I have actually learned since then as well, so I probably would have been able to do it, but in the day, it was a piano or nothing, really, so there you go.
Now, sort of lyrically as well, do you sort of look back differently to a lot of the songs that you released from maybe sort of 10, 15, 20 years ago?
Well, yeah, in the same way that I suppose you'd look, I'm in my 40s now, you'd look back at yourself when you were in your 20s and go, what kind of different person. The core of me is probably still the same, but awful lot of things have happened and changed, and I think that first album in particular was very optimistic, and it was around a millennium, and there was lots of, what's going to happen. It was quite a sort of hope-filled time, really. I think no one really knew what was going to happen. It was the end of Britpop, and there's been a few years of what's going to happen to bands and guitar music and stuff like that. So yeah, I think our first album was very optimistic and naive in a nice way. I think it just sort of resonated with lots of people because it was it was full of hope and positivity, and that's nice, really. I'm glad. At the time there was a lot of music that wasn't like that, so I think we just provided a little bit of an antidote to that sort of thing.
I mean, I was listening to some of your music again for the first time in a while, and all of it holds up really well. Like, it sounds fantastic.
Yeah, I mean that is weird. I mean, and that's not obviously something we planned or. Thank you for saying that. I think we've sort of noticed that live as well. Some of the older stuff, some of the songs are 20 years old, and you go, they still do. The sonically they hold up. They don't sound particularly 90s or noughties, or it's sort of, maybe that's because some of our inspiration was going even further back. Sort of, there was a lot of 70s inspiration there, and so it wasn't particularly of a time. So maybe that's why it's sort of, something like Dancing in the Moonlight, especially, is sounds super fresh. You hear it on the radio still a lot, and it sounds like it could have been recorded yesterday. So
it does.
It's very odd, and maybe it's because it's not necessarily of a particular time, or but it does that live as well. They do seem to they've aged well, which is something you cannot really predict, or and some music doesn't age as well. So hopefully the stuff we're making now will continue to age like fine cheese, maybe.
Absolutely, and I'm sure it will. Now, you obviously referenced Dancing in the Moonlight, and it'd be silly of me not to mention that particular song, because, I mean, could you have ever imagined it would turn into such an anthem?
I mean, no, obviously not. I mean, there was a little bit of, when we first did it, I'm in an iron whether actually we wanted to go through with it. We recorded it with a producer we were working with whilst we were doing a few other tracks. And he was very much, you guys want to try this? We didn't know the song. At the time, the album was already out. I think we'd already, we were doing okay. I think we'd gone gold with it or something. But it was a tough time for bands at radio, I think, and it was very much, you sort of need. And the albums, everyone was really proud of the album. The company was, everyone was behind it. We just needed that one sort of thing to try and break down a few doors initially. And a lot at the time, it wasn't very particularly done to do a cover, really. There was lots of. It was a bit weird for a band to do such a sort of kind of commercial. It's not. I mean, it's not overtly commercial, but so a lot of bands were like, you shouldn't be doing covers and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, obviously, we never thought for 1 minute it would end up being this track that was still played 23 years later or whatever, and seems to be sort of cross the generations. When we play it live, it seems to be the people that were around the first time, and they're and the next generation and the next generation all seem to know it. It's one of those that's sort of ingrained in people's consciousness now. So, which is amazing, and we're very delighted that it's hung about, and very blessed that it's become part of love it or hate it. It's sort of part of the woodwork, really.
Now, one of the things particularly like about that song, aside from the song itself, is the video that accompanies it. What's the story behind there? Was there any?
I think it was just supposed to be the ultimate sort of party house, really. It was a house. We filmed it at a very newly built architectural house in Deptford High Street, which is not the the most glamorous. It wasn't LA. It wasn't Malibu. It wasn't anything like that. It was there. But I think, I mean, I don't know if there's actually a particular story for this. It's the ultimate party. Some guy turns up in his Vespa. Everyone's throwing leaves around. I don't know why you did that at a party, but you've got this cool bit in the garden with fairy lights. And
that's right, yeah.
It's got all this. I don't know. People keep turning up at the door, so it's kind of. We just had a bundle of laughs filming it, and and then all did what we normally do. You know, when they said rap, we all managed to get to the pub for last orders and have a few drinks. But yeah, I mean, it's one of them. We're lucky because it's, you know, you can have great songs with awful videos, and that seems to just be you know, one of those great songs, and the video seems to
have matched it as well.
Encapsulated. Yeah, it really did. Yeah, so we were lucky.
I mean, the reason I mentioned the video is because there really isn't anything like that in terms of like how it looks. I don't think that's been made before or since, really. Like, no. It's like in the way it was shot and everything like that. I just absolutely love it, and it's even if my TV or any of my devices were on mute, as soon as I saw the first 3 seconds, I would have known that was Dance in the Moonlight, Toploader.
Yeah.
And I knew exactly where I was, what I could expect. And I think it seems to me now, I don't know if you agree, but we went through a phase a while ago where like a lot of the sort of videos sort of looked and felt the sort of same. So,
right.
And so, for example, you went through a certain phase where it was all about certain boy bands and like pop boy bands like a Westlife or NSYNC or anything like that, and it was all about you have the set moves, certain dance sequences, so you knew exactly roughly where it was going to go. Do you see what I'm saying? Whereas as soon as you saw yours, it set you apart in that sense, that just the way it was shot and everything about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, you just have to put that down to the director and the crew, and it was very sort of heavily stylised, and they knew exactly what they wanted to do. There's a bit of northern soul dancing in there. There's a bit of everything, so you don't sort of ever drift off when you're watching it. I mean, I haven't sat down and watched it from start to finish for a long time, but obviously I see clips of it when people play it, and yeah, I really don't know again, it's one of those sort of little, I don't know whether the video's really good because people love the song, or whether they'd love it if the song, I don't know. I mean, the videos are always a weird one for us. We didn't, you know, these days, but since then we've had much more creative input into our videos, and we did a video on when we came back together on the album. It's called Only Human. There was a video called Never Stop Wondering, which, you know, we wrote the treatment for and got much more involved. But I mean, in those days it was a bit of a, you know, it was pitched out to producers. They'd come back with something sort of quirky, or, you know, everyone's trying to find an angle, and I think that the treatment for that one just was, you know, the ultimate house party. And I think we just, you know, had faith in the director to pull off his vision, and he did. And Deptford High Street, he would know. Did
it remind you of any parties that you went to when you was younger?
No, we had never had posh parties in people's architects. The guys that owned it were architects. No, I mean, I lived in a bedsit in a you know, flat share with Dan when we were, you know, doing rehearsing,
right,
trying to get the band signed and stuff, and our house did not look like that. So no, in answer to your question, no, I'd never been to a party like that before.
And now, I was just looking earlier on as well. Like I didn't realise that, like, on Spotify, it's gone absolutely crazy as well, hasn't it? That song. Like,
I think we're nearly
it's just under 1 billion streams.
Yeah. So I mean, again, it's just because of the nature of that song. Just seems to connect with people, and has been making them happy since we made it, really. And it just does seem to just connect across globally as well. I mean, we wind up in getting played in all sorts of. I've been on, you know, holidays, and we've been playing places, and you wouldn't think in a million years, and then suddenly you hear the opening bars come out on the bar radio, and there you are. I mean, it does seem to cross all sorts of divides and bring people together. So yeah, 1 billion streams is nuts. I mean, it's nuts.
Now, you say that you've obviously played it in some pretty sort of strange and unusual places there. What's the sort of strangest place that you didn't necessarily think certain songs of yours, like Dancing in the Moonlight, would cross over, but when you played them, they just surprised you?
I think we all thought we had a song called Achilles Heel, and we always thought, and that was on the first album, and that was actually got a higher position than Dancing in the Moonlight, which I was
very pleased about
because I wrote that. But we always thought that would go down really. We did a lot of tours in Europe and Germany, and I think we always thought, yeah, Achilles Heel definitely sounds like it would do well in Germany and stuff like that. But it never really. I mean, that wasn't your question, but I think it was something to do with the pronunciation of Achilles Heel. They couldn't quite get the language round. But I don't know. I mean, you know, as far as it crossing over, I like to say the first album was very optimistic and very hope-filled, and it was one of those albums is already in the top 10, and when you've got an album that's already in the top 10, more people hear it, more people listen to it, because they seem to, there's some sort of validation that everyone's listening to it or whatever. It would seem to be very much like that, and then you suddenly, you turn up at the petrol station and it's on the counter, and everyone go, oh, I'll listen to that. But it's I don't know. I mean, I don't know. It's still to this day the most rewarding thing about writing new music, and and our catalogue is when people come up and go, oh man, I love that song that was on blah blah blah, and you go, wow, no one really mentions that one, or no one brings that one up, but it's touched, it's said something to someone. So, and that's still the most rewarding thing. Or I love that song that just or a B-side or something like that. That's still, you forget that sometimes, because writing and recording can be quite insular. So you forget that actually people are going to hear it, which is the most important, which is what it's all about at the end of the day.
Oh, absolutely. Now, you said a little while ago, obviously you referenced when you reformed. Now, do you see the first part of the band's history and the second part as two separate different things, or do you see it just as one?
Yeah, I think it's two separate things. I feel as a person, I feel like two separate people, to be honest. I think that time we had a part was very necessary for lots of reasons. I just, in those periods, I mean, I had no intention of being in Toploader or getting a band back together or anything like that. I'd had enough. I'd had, during the first stint, I'd had a real personal family tragedy. My brother died, and I was so busy, didn't really have an awful lot of time to process any of that. So it was, at the same time, something such as so amazing was happening, with the band and stuff. I had this real horrible sort of personal tragic thing happen to my family, and that was quite difficult to deal with. But the interim, we grew up. I got married, had kids. Everything kind of changed, and it was quite necessary to people will say, don't they wish they knew what they knew earlier on. But yeah, I think there's very much two things, and as I said earlier, I think I've enjoyed it more this time now. Really, I think I've enjoyed it's much more on our terms. I mean, some of the the stuff we used to argue about in the first one, colours of t-shirts and the admin and all this other nonsense that really wasn't what we started a band for, but is part of being in a big band. So it was kind of mind-numbing. So yeah, it's two different parts. I'll take part two if you're offering me the choice.